Foxes, Chapter 4. The girls saw her anger as Jeannie stomped into the living room. "We're walking," she said, heading across the room for the couch. She jerked her feed-bag-shaped brown leather bag off the end table, sending a ballpoint pen and somebody's little mascara tube spinning off onto the floor. She strode towards the door. "You know what I really hate about this place? When some place is too small, you can never find anything. No shit." She slammed out into the hallway. The three girls hustled after her. "I should go live in New York," she called, as the whole bunch clambered noisily down the stairs. "In a loft, and become a painter or a writer or something. I mean it. I need space. 20-foot ceilings." "Really," said Annie, bringing up the rear. "Let's all go to New York. Open up a boutique." At the landing where the stairs doubled back on themselves, Jeannie stopped. "Hi, Michael." A tall, slim boy with shoulder-length blonde hair, a wispy blonde mustache, and a perfectly angelic face was wrestling a bulky cello up the stairs. The mass of the cello both blocked the stairwell and made Michael, with his gold-rimmed glasses, seem even more delicate by comparison. "Oh, hi, Jeannie," he said, trying to pull the cello to the side. "What's in there?" Jeannie asked dumbly. "The body," said Annie in her Elsa Lanchester, Bride of Frankenstein voice. "A cello," Michael answered kindly. "I didn't know you were into the cello," Jeannie went on. "I'm teaching myself." Jeannie gave him a friendly smile. He smiled back, his sweet angel blue eyes open wide. "We're late, guys," said Madge. "Oh, God, yes. Let's scarf up some school." "Slurp, slurp," cracked Annie, cocking her hips sideways for emphasis and giving her purse a quick twirl. "You don't get a lot of maturity from these kids," Jeannie said, squeezing by the cello. One by one, the girls filed past and bounded down the stairs. Jeannie pushed open the heavy glass door at the foot of the stairs and stopped dead. The girls piled up behind her. Just outside the door, on the little flagstone entranceway, stood a white-helmeted police officer, huge, looming above them. He was a bike cop, black jackboots, white stripe up the black pants, black nylon windbreaker, gray shades. Ominously, he didn't say a word, just stood straddling the doorway like a stormtrooper. He took a long stride forward and slapped Annie hard across the mouth with a black-gloved hand. The girls freaked. "Hey!" cried Jeannie, raising her hand, but at the same time backing away from the enormous figure. Annie made a yelping shriek and scrambled back towards the stairs, following hard on her. The cop took another cut and cracked her across the butt as she started up the stairs. "No, Dad, no, don't!" Annie cried. Her cop father starting up the stairs 3 at a time after her, and would have caught her at the landing but for missing a step and slipping briefly to his hands and knees. At the landing, Annie, tears streaming down her cheeks, scrambled out the window onto the carport roof. By the time her old man hit the window, she was in midair, heading for the tiny strip of side lawn. Blonde hair flying, she landed and rolled and was up and running, purse still in hand. Frank, her father, pounded down the stairs and pushed roughly past the other girls, sending Jeannie stumbling backwards towards the ground. The girls watched in disbelieving horror as the fire-breathing cop crashed right through the bordering hedge and raced across the grass towards the corner around which Annie had disappeared. Jeannie and Madge and Deidre rushed up the stairs to the landing window. From there, they watched Annie sprinting across the parking lot 2 buildings over. She ducked behind the rusty orange Dempsey dumpster, just as her puffing, adrenaline-psyched father came barreling out of the alleyway and stopped, arms up and extended, ready for kill-or-die combat with major felons. He was out of control. The girls held their breath. He stalked slowly through the parking area, looking this way and that. He moved to the side of the dumpster, turned, and surveyed the scene with feet widespread, hands on hips. He stood there for a long moment, just looking, listening. Finally, he moved off into the next parking lot. Annie squeezed out from behind the dumpster, scurried low behind a line of parked cars, and dashed away between 2 houses. Jeannie let her breath out in a whistle. Deidre shook her head and let her jaw go slack. Madge held both hands over her mouth. That guy is sick, said Deidre, as they turned and tromped down the stairs. What are we going to do? Madge asked. Call the cops, said Jeannie with a sour look. They walked out of the building and towards the street where Frank Malik's cycle still stood, a heavy black and white Honda, junked up with plastic saddle boxes and reflectors and lights and radios. Jeannie took an angry swipe with her bag at the white whip antenna as they passed by. Spring! It bent over and leaped right back to upright. King creep, Jeannie muttered. They walked off. Foxes, Chapter 5. She was near 60, but moved around with the energy of an 8-year-old. Her wild hair, gray at the roots, had a strange blue-black sheen. She wore white medical smocks and a constant smile. She smiled even when she was chattering, and when she was not chattering, there emerged from her smiling mouth a kind of mumbling, monotone hum, like a tireless motor. The kids didn't mess with Mrs. Steiner, not because they feared her reprisals, but because she wouldn't notice. It would achieve no purpose under the sun. You're lifting the child by the leg, cried Mrs. Steiner, her high-pitched voice rising almost to be a squeal. She rushed at Jeannie from across the room, her arms up, hair flying crazily. Jeannie looked up from the plastic dishpan. Bath water slopped over the side and dribbled down the leg of the table. Please, please, you are not savages. Take the child gently, just so, gently. Jeannie held the rubber doll in the air by one leg. It dripped into the pan. She turned around to Mrs. Steiner with a sick look. That's a doll, Mrs. Steiner. We show our baby love, and our baby will grow up in love, clicked the woman, reaching for the dripping object. A rubber doll, repeated Jeannie, holding it out by the leg. The other girls had ceased their doll bathings and were grinning in Jeannie's direction. Mrs. Steiner took the doll and quickly swaddled it in a towel, as though to head off a chill. Jeannie's face twisted in disgust. Hush-a-bye, baby, on the treetop. Mrs. Steiner cradled the doll and sang to it. Jeannie looked over at the girl in the Levi skirt at the next table and rolled her eyes. Brain damage, the girl whispered, and put her head down on her arm. Lost in her lullaby, Mrs. Steiner wandered over the window to warm the baby in the sunlight. Doll and dishpan under one arm, Jeannie sprinted through the hordes of students, skidded up to her locker, and stood grumbling impatiently while the kid with the locker above her took his time. He was a long-limbed gringo named Loser, shoulder-length, weedy, blonde hair, half-hanging, half-matted, a filthy faded Hawaiian shirt, a pair of ancient ripped blue jeans. He looked down at Jeannie and gave a bad-teeth, shit-eating grin, a Ratzo Rizzo look-alike. He was pouring a shot into a Coke can from a pint bottle of vodka. Mine? Said Jeannie, giving him a cold eye and nudging his legs aside to get at her locker. She flipped the combination lock quickly back and forth and snapped it open. Loser leaned back against the waxy yellow metal lockers and sipped from his Coke can. He looked Jeannie up and down. Want a cocktail? He offered. Jeannie lifted the doll by the leg. I'm a mother. She slammed the dishpan sideways into the locker. Loser laughed his idiot laugh. All right, he snorted into his can. Jeannie sidearmed the doll into the locker and slammed the door before it could bounce out. A handsome, slim, blonde youth appeared behind Jeannie and gave her a light kiss on the top of her head as she was still squatting before her locker. Jeannie jerked her head around and almost bumped the boy's nose. Creep, she said. You gonna say hello? Hello, Scott, said Jeannie, rising to her feet. She turned away and headed into the mass of shoving, jabbering kids. A boy in a red t-shirt flew by her and clipped her shoulder. Hey, Schiffer! She started to yell, but clammed up as a counselor in his tan leisure suit and Dodger blue baseball cap angled in from the other direction and grabbed the kid by the arm to slow him down. Catching up, Scott fell in step beside Jeannie. Miss me? His sunny blonde hair was razor cut, parted in the middle, and blown back casually. He had a confident bounce in his stride. "How's Susan?" Jeannie asked, without turning her head. "Susan Halpern? You know some other Susans?" "Okay, so her folks invited me down to their beach house. It's nice, Newport. Besides, they were there the whole time." "They never took their eyes off you?" she said in a bored tone. "Well, yeah, sorta." Scott snickered self-consciously. The counselor in the baseball cap caught up with them. "Hey, Jeannie, I like your new hairdo," said the shiny-faced man with the bogus smile. "It's not new, Mr. Simmons. You coming to the office?" Still the smile. He tilted his head and started towards the green metal door. Jeannie started to follow. Scott held her arm. "Don't I get a kiss or something?" "You think I want Susan Halpern's bacteria?" she said, a mild contempt in her eyes. Scott didn't let her go. He moved in on her, tilted her chin up, and gave her a more than friendly kiss. Went Loser, snapping his finger out of his cheek as he walked by and leered. Jeannie broke away and gave Loser a look and followed Mr. Simmons. Toward the back of the large open bay office, two boys slouched 2 seats away from each other in a row of molded plastic chairs against the wall. Over them stood a security officer looking like a golf pro. He posed with his hands on his hips, brown and white checked sports jacket tucked back to reveal the service revolver, legs spread, feet shod in two-tone brown and white Corfam shoes. Spotting the counselor, the security cop moved over and conferred with him in a low voice, gesturing towards the two boys, one of them black with a natural, the other white with his hair in a ponytail. "They were fighting," said the security man. "Something racial?" The counselor grabbed his baseball cap by the bill and snugged it down. "Nope, a girl." "Thank God," said Simmons. He asked the other man to wait. He motioned Jeannie to follow him over to the long counter opposite the door. He walked around the counter and nodded to the spot in front of it where he wanted Jeannie to stand. She stood there with her lips pursed, holding her books at her side. The counselor leaned across the counter and spoke in an exaggeratedly confidential manner. "You know where Annie is?" "No." Jeannie watched his face to see what he was up to. "Any idea?" "No." "Her dad's looking for her, you know." "No," Jeannie said. Simmons gave her a quizzical look. "I mean, no, I don't," she said. "I'd like to talk to her first and find out what's going on in her head," said the counselor. "Maybe I could smooth things out with her dad. He gets psycho," said Jeannie. "Angry. He thinks that she should go to a hospital." "Huh? Where?" Jeannie hooked her hair back from her face and stared at the counselor. "A private hospital, someplace out in Sun Valley." "A mental hospital?" Shock showed on her face. "They've worked with a lot of runaways." "She doesn't run away anymore," Jeannie said, real fright starting to run up her backbone. "She's been gone for a week." "She was at my house." "My house. Ask my mom." "I know, honey, but the guy's her dad. He's worried." The counselor tugged down the bill of his cap and tried for a sympathetic smile. "You know why her sister ran off?" Jeannie put her books and both hands up on the counter. "Really, Mr. Simmons, do you know why her sister ran off?" "He put handcuffs on her, on his daughter, because she got pregnant by some guy, and he acts like she's some sort of fallen woman. And all she wanted to do is go get an abortion or something." "No shit, Mr. Simmons." His eyebrows flicked at the profanity, but he said nothing. He straightened up. "Yeah, he gets really angry." He mimed another sympathetic look. Jeannie looked at his face and realized she was talking to somebody from another planet. "Yeah," she said, dropping her hands. She stood for a minute, gazing out the window over the heads of the two brawlers. She stretched to Mr. Simmons, turned, and left the office.